Well, I guess it's probably about time I finally read Frankenstein. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to be talking about Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And yeah, I felt like it was pretty overdue. I commented, I feel like I may have read this when I was a kid, but I had almost no memory. As I was reading through, I felt like certain things stuck out that I remembered, but also there was the vast majority I didn't, so I don't know if it was just some things because it's been around a long time and I'm somewhat familiar, obviously, but there were a lot of surprises here as well. And it's one that I enjoyed, but I definitely have both some positive and some negative things about it too. So it's definitely it was an interesting time reading through. So in this, I'm gonna start off non-spoiler, but then I'm probably gonna talk some spoilers because given the age of this book, I feel like you generally know what's going to happen, and so I don't feel like it's that big of a deal to have spoilers or something like this. So fair warning, but I'll note it before I'm really getting in there. But the first thing, and just reading this, the writing is really beautiful, and Mary Shelley definitely has a way with words. From the very beginning with the letters, which is something I didn't actually remember, is it starts off with a man who's on a ship going toward the North Pole and kind of runs into Victor Frankenstein, who's chasing the monster, and then he tells him his whole story, and that's where it's then recounted to us, the reader, and where it's going there. The writing is just beautiful, and I really, really enjoyed it. But then there's so many things that it's just interesting because they're so very different from the kind of the lore that's really come afterwards. Because this is really different, and if you've never read the book and you've just seen the movies, there's a lot of things you may think that about the story that just aren't necessarily there. Because this one focuses on a lot of different things, and sometimes it really worked for me, and sometimes it didn't. And an example of that is, and we're just gonna jump into the technically spoilers. It's whatever. So we have a lot of family dynamic drama in the very beginning of the story because we're getting the whole backstory. You can't just tell the story of him creating the monster. He's got to tell the whole story. So we find out that his father was very good friends with somebody, and basically he went broke and was destitute, and just ended up kind of trying to live outside of the public eye, and then died with no money. And so he took pity on this man's daughter, a child, and had her fostered for a couple of years until she's old enough, and then they promptly get married. And it's commented in here too that it's yes, there's a big age gap, but it was they truly were in love, and that sort of thing. But that's kind of the first part of where knowing that Mary Shelley wrote this, and I think finished writing this when she was about 19, I believe. I feel like some of this has to be kind of like intended almost as commentary, or maybe that's the way that I'm looking at it with a modern mind, but I'm just like really? I feel like that's kind of intentional, which is showing that, that's the kind of thing that would happen, and probably wouldn't have been thought about a whole lot at the time, but it's pretty messed up. But what gets worse, and what I feel like has to be intentional, is so then they're married, and Victor, our main character, is born. But then they like to go off and travel places, and so they're in they're in Italy, and they come across this very poor family, and among the poor family is this just pretty little blonde-haired girl, and they find out that she was basically being fostered there for a French family, and then the father there was arrested. And so then they just couldn't really afford but she had nowhere to go. And so, of course, they're like, oh, we'll take this girl, and now we're going to raise her. And it's even phrased that this girl is being brought as like a present for Victor. And just like the implications there as well. I'm just like, that's so messed up. And what's going to feel like that's gotta be some commentary there, just talking about being put that way. And I kept thinking that I'm hoping that this isn't what it is, because it also 100% seemed early on that it was going to be the expectation that that she's expected to eventually marry Victor. And I'm like, maybe I was misinterpreting that. That's sure what it sounded like. But no, that was 100% the interpretation as well. And so it just like that. And then later with her too, it just Elizabeth, by the way, but also just all of the comments and the way Victor sees her as possession. And then when the mother dies, she's expected to like take over those duties as well. And I'm just like, man, all of this weird family situations and family drama. And then early on, I'm like, I feel like normally that would really put me off of a book, but I was okay with it for whatever reason, and had a good time with it still. But I'm just like, this is so messed up, and like very very toxic family situations for sure. Absolutely. And so there was a lot of that at the beginning, and I didn't mind it so much, but that does kind of get to where I had some more issues, because I feel like we just spent a lot of time in a quite short book. This is not a long book. This copy is like 234 pages. It's not a long book. We spent a lot of time on stuff that seemed not the most relevant. And like, you know, I was okay too early on. We're hearing all about Victor and like all the things that he's studying and like where he's getting some of his ideas, that sort of thing. But we also just spend a lot of time with miscellaneous things. I feel like this is something that I've seen in a lot of classics where it's we kind of stop and then we tell these other stories, and sometimes they're related, albeit tangentially, and sometimes they're not. And we get that a ton here. Like when Victor and the monster first meet back up, the monster tells this whole entire story of everything that's happened, including how he watched a family and learned to speak and learned all this thing. And then, but we also have to find out all about this family's drama and all of this kind of thing. And then later, too, when Victor's supposed to be working on creating the bride for his creature, him and his friend just like, yeah, like, we're going to go to London. And we spend a lot of time describing all of the different sights and things they're seeing in London and how cool it is. And I'm just like, is this really necessary? And so I feel like despite this being a really short book, like, I could see why there would be abridged versions of this, because you could absolutely cut a lot out of here and still have the same base story, because we spend a lot of time on those things. So that's something that, it got to me over time, and I think because I just was, mentally, I think I was approaching this a little bit different, because of the fact that it is a book that was written such a long time ago. I feel like I was processing things a little bit differently, but I feel like a lot of stuff we spent a bit too much time on, and that has been something I've had issues with some other classics and the style as well. But the writing was really good, and I really enjoyed the writing and the style, and so I feel like that helped. Although that stuff did bring it down a bit for me, I have to say also. But the overall story here too, some things that I thought were interesting is the actual creation of and the manipulation of life is really glossed over. Like, we really don't get a lot about that, and that's the big thing I feel like in media later on. It was focused on so much with Frankenstein as it's the crazy part of actually trying to give life, and then all of the, you know, it's alive and the lightning, you know, all that stuff. Like, none of that comes from the book. That was all inventions later. It's very glossed over, and Frankenstein's just kind of described as this kind of yellow, monstrous type of creature, and we don't get a ton more than that. And then really it's just basically Victor Frankenstein and the monster both being really, really miserable. It reminds me, I was talking to Tori and Murphy, who both really enjoy this, and I can't remember which one of them was, but I think it might have been Tori. And I said that like a bad description, or like a short description of the book could be Victor and the monster try to determine who's more depressed or something. And I'm like, it does work, because that's really what we're focusing on. We kind of focus on that back and forth, and the idea of this whole idea of creating life and what should have been done, and then Victor feeling real sorry for himself, but then the monster's like, hey, you created me, and what about me? No, everybody just wants nothing to do with me because I'm a monster. And so it's really like there's a lot of dialogue between the two, and it's once again, it's not what I expected from the little bits I remember and just from kind of knowing. So it focuses more on some of those philosophical questions. And I just can't help but thinking, as going through here too, that it feels like more so the point is that Victor is the real monster, because all throughout going through here, and once again, maybe partially this is me looking at it from a modern lens, but all through he's portrayed as the victim, very much so. And even when he meets up with the monster and he's telling him all his woes, it's like, oh, he's a monster, he's killed people, and he would just, if I give him what he wants, he's just gonna kill more people. I can't do it. But it's like Victor never seems to care that much about actually protecting his family. He never seems to feel too guilty for super long, and he's the one who did this to begin with. Like, he doesn't seem to be the most well-adjusted type of person. Like I said, all of the stuff with Elizabeth as well, which is super just creepy and not okay, and just all the kinds of things that he's done. And like, he feels his guilt, but then he doesn't seem to care. And even at the end, like, he's actually going to finally like track down the monster, but it's still like, oh, woe is me, my life is so terrible. And I'm just like, it's so interesting that in this story I just feel absolutely no sympathy for Victor. And all the other characters around him whose lives that he ruined through his actions, indirectly, to be fair, are really the ones to feel bad about. And so it's really interesting. It's just, this really takes a different tack than I feel like what we get, because this doesn't read at all like a monster movie or feature or anything. And so it's interesting to see something like this. Well, I do find it to be flawed, despite the things I really liked about it too, and I had a really fun time with it. I ended up with around 4 stars for this, for the record too. But I had a really fun time with it. But it's interesting to see that this was then extrapolated into so much more. And I know it's one of the things is, it's public domain, so anybody can, make movies or TV or whatnot. And so characters like that have tended to get used a ton. But even if you look at like, the oldest, Frankenstein movie, the original movie version, so much in there was also invented or changed, and it was very much like based on this, but it's not like, this story is vastly different. So it's really interesting to see something so foundational. I had a pretty good time with this one. I've always been a little hit or miss with classics, and I can absolutely see why this would be a miss because of some of the things, like I said, the fact that it's a short book, but it seems to waste a lot of time. The writing style also probably won't work for everyone, and just kind of the melodrama as well, which, like I said, normally the melodrama is super not for me, but I actually kind of enjoyed some of it. Which is strange to me, but hey, it is what it is. But just a really interesting time going through here, and it had me like really curious with some of the different like books and sources and things that are mentioned in here, to look into more, and just had me interested. It really did pull me in and have my interest going, despite the issues. And it's definitely one of those books, like I feel like a lot of classics, where you're regularly expected to take something at face value. And especially I feel like in modern books and the modern readers don't like to do that. And that's usually a complaint, is, oh, if I'm just expected to accept this at face value, you're not going to explain why. That's usually a negative thing. It's not to say that it's not here, but I feel like part of that is just sort of the way that it is. I'm not the best well-read in classics by any means, but I've seen that a lot. Even in like Count of Monte Cristo, which I absolutely love, there are plenty of things in there where you don't really know how something happened. You're just told that it did, and you're just you believe it. And so it's like, it's one of those things that I can get past it, but I can also get why it's an issue as well. So definitely, there are some flaws here, but I really enjoyed this, and this is why I ended up picking up another one of my paper mill classics. And I think I'm going to check more of these out and just see. And I imagine not all of them will go as good as this one, but I enjoyed it. I think it's worth a read, even though I've just been talking spoilers. Like I said, it's Frankenstein. I feel like it's not that big of a deal to talk spoilers about something that's this old. But I think it's definitely something that's worth a read, and I can see why it's beloved even with the issues, just because the writing was really enjoyable, and just the kind of absurd and crazy melodramatic stuff going on was entertaining, even though usually that's not something I'm super huge on. It just kind of worked here. So that's pretty much it for this one, though. Make sure to let me know your thoughts on this one, and if there are any specific classics that you would like to see me read. I have quite a few, so I'd be interested to hear what recommendations that you would like to see next, if you are somebody who wants to see more videos of classics anyway. I mean, this is kind of fantasy technically, so it sort of fits. But anyway, that's it for this one. So let me know in the comments. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the link in the description as always for the Wizardly Enclave Discord. If you want to chat books, about this book, other books, really anything at all, it's a lot of fun. We'd love to have you. And of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.